Good night, good evening. Namaste, assalamu alaikum to all of our viewers in Guyana and over in the diaspora where everyone is interested, of course, in knowing what's happening in Guyana. Brothers and sisters, all. Tonight we have a panel of esteemed professionals that have been practicing we laymen call the practice of law. But for them, it's not just a practice. For them, it's their life. It's what they've engaged themselves in. And so, if anything at all, they would know the inner details or at least guide us as to what's happening or how to see it through their lenses. Tonight we have one of the commissioners of GECOM, Mr. Sase Gunraj, who is himself an attorney at law with his own firm. We also have Mr. Kamal Ramkarran, who is also a senior attorney at one of the the entities in Guyana. He too has been practicing for a very long time. I don't mean to say he's old, but he's been in the practice. And we also have Mr. Sanjeev Datadin, sorry, Mr. Kamal Ramkarran from Cameron and Shepherd. And we have Mr. Sanjeev Datadin of Whitworth Chambers, who we would have seen. He is a member of the PPPC slate. And so we would have seen him on the PPP's front line over the past couple of days, if not weeks. Gentlemen, welcome to this program. And to our viewers out there, before I ask our guests to give their comments, I want to let you know that tonight we want to look at a few of the more legalistic matters, especially with regards to the current state of play vis-a-vis GECOM, the injunctions being filed or having been filed at the court, both the injunctions and the status of it from the previous matter and the one now. We're also going to look at a number of things that would have been said by the various commissioners of GECOM. And we're willing, of course, as always, to take your questions. Please be aware that we have extended an invitation to other members of GECOM and to members of various political parties to join not just this program, but future programs. And we will be happy to accommodate them later. Just before we therefore get into our discussion topic for tonight, I'd like to ask our team, and I'd like to, in doing so, give credit to Nohar Singh, Devin Bisoon, and all the people at Globespan who's working hard behind the scenes to make things happen. To start our program off, then, let me ask our Globespan team member, Russell, to give us an update on travel advisory, because this is something that we all must pay careful attention to. Over to you, Russell, and our Globespan team.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Well, my name is Russell, and I'm from TravelSpan. And during these challenging times, we would just like to update you guys on the various travel advisories that is affecting or may affecting our clients at this point in time. Currently, all of our New York offices, Guyana, Trinidad, they're all open with regular business hours, and we are working with minimal staff. So we are here to assist you. Just to update you guys based on the current airline status, American Airlines has suspended service to and from Guyana until May 6th of this year. Caribbean Airlines will not have any flights to Guyana due to the airport closure, and they have also consolidated some of their flights to and from Trinidad and Tobago. Caribbean Airlines also will only be allowing passengers holding a valid Trinidad and Tobago passport to be checked in for any flight with Trinidad as its final destination or transit point. This is in effect until March 31st of this month. JetBlue has canceled all of their flights to and from Port of Spain until March 31st. And as of this evening, they have made a decision that they are going to defer their inaugural flight, which was supposed to be on April 2nd. It will now be in October, on October 26th. Eastern Airlines have suspended service to and from Guyana until April 9th due to the closure of the airport in Guyana. So basically, due to the closure of the airport in Guyana, from midnight tonight, there will be no flights departing to or from Guyana for the next 14 days. Note that prices are going to be very low, so it may be a good time to book for future travel. So flights will start operating in about 2 weeks from now, so you want to take advantage of that. Just a side note to let you guys know that we have been receiving numerous calls from customers who've booked with other online companies, and they're basically telling us that they're having a very hard time getting through to those companies. Unfortunately, TravelSpan, Emerald's Travel, and TravelSpan GT can only assist customers that book through travelspan.com, emeraldstravel.com, or any of our TravelSpan, Emeralds, or TravelSpan GT offices. We are regretful, but we cannot access your bookings to make the changes once it was not booked through us. So we hope that this information would be very helpful to you. Our offices continue to remain open on regular business hours. And in New York, you can reach us at 718-845-0437. In Trinidad, 665-3383. And in Guyana, 227-1701. Have a good night and stay safe, my friends.
Sorry, thank you, Russell. Somebody had asked that whether you have any free tickets for them, and I would answer for you that maybe you have, but they can't fly to Guyana with it because our airports are closed. So, viewers, there you have it, the travel advisory from TravelSpan, Globespan team. Just be aware that airports all across the region are basically closing. Everybody's closing their borders, so that travel, and it is rightly so, that travel would be restricted. I do know that I think cargo still operates. So that for the business community, if there's any business ongoing, cargo flights from La Parkin and so forth is still operating. However, TravelSpan continues to be ready to take your calls and to help you and to accept bookings even now for the future. Ladies and gentlemen, so let's come to the substantive discussion tonight. You would have all heard what's happened in the past. It's just been 2 weeks. It seems like a year. What would have happened over the past 2 to 2.5 weeks? And what can I say? It's been heart-wrenching at times, depressing at times, and words cannot describe the feeling that many has. Half of our population has been exulting that their side would have won, another half has been depressed that the elections are stolen. And you've had these ups and downs. There have been times when teams are saying they will assess or they will check and they will supervise counts. They started from card mission and all of that for the SOPs and the verification. Then CARICOM came in. And then as of yesterday, we hit another tsunami wave, I would think. This is not roadblock anymore. Because this one now is where I do believe, I'm sure the attorneys can correct me if I'm misstating this, but I do believe this is where the head of the APNO AFC being President Granger, virtually an action has been taken to block APNO's request to have a recount. So those are some of the intricacies that we'll be looking at tonight. But we want to start by asking Mr. Sase Gunraj. So tonight we have Commissioner Sase Gunraj. We also have Mr. Sanjeev Datadin, and we have Mr. Kamal Ramkarran. Tonight, I want to start by asking Mr. Sase Gunraj, give us in a few words, if you can, sir, what's the current status? We know as of last night, as of yesterday, we heard you on television, we heard Sanjeev also on various programs stating your surprise. Mr. Gunraj, 2 days ago in the evening, you used the words, I am cautious but optimistic in what would unfold in the next day. And I think you were hoping the count would get underway. And I saw and heard your words and your feelings when you started to explain to the population that men in hazmat suits turned up there. So I don't know if Sanjeev and team would have been the pests they were coming for. But Sase, if you can tell us in your own words, where we are presently with GECOM.
Good evening, good evening, viewers. I know at least one member of this panel is an ardent cricket fan, so I will you critic as we are, it seems as though the covers are on the pitch. But that gives no comfort because as we have grown accustomed to GECOM, while your eyes are on the pitch and covers on it, lots of things are happening in the back room. After the arrival of the high-level team under the auspices of CARICOM, I believe, and you quoted me correctly in saying that I was cautiously optimistic that this process will get somewhere. Unfortunately, it did not. What instead happened was that there was a series of events which, in my mind, solely sought to frustrate the process and perhaps derail it. I don't want to say it has been derailed because the sentiments expressed by the Secretary General of CARICOM yesterday, Ambassador Erwin Leroy, is that the high-level team has been withdrawn, but CARICOM remains ready to lend whatever further assistance is necessary. That translates to me that if the modalities are put in place to facilitate another, but to facilitate a recount, I anticipate that CARICOM, all things considered, should be available or willing to send another team to assist as they have done recently. But all of this has now come to a halt because, of course, of the injunction that was served and injunction that was served on the commission, and that has put a pause on the recount and everything else that we were contemplating up to yesterday. I'm not hearing you, Yo.
Sorry, thank you for that. Can you get me now?
Yes, I can.
Good. So, Mr. Datadin, I want to come to you just. So, Kamal, I want to come to you first. Here is, I want your opinion. Now, you are not on any political platform. You have maintained your professional, not that the rest are not professional guys, but you have maintained your practice and you have been an observer, albeit you cannot divorce yourself from what's happening in the country. From your platform of an independent thinker, seeing what has transpired with CARICOM especially, what's your thoughts and where do you think we stand presently? Is it dangerous ground legally? Is it no man's land? Where are we from your perspective?
Well, Yoga, I think we're in looking glass world. You know, when you look in the mirror on the other side, things are not quite the same. They're opposite. So we're in looking glass world. You have the president and leader of the opposition saying to CARICOM, please come and supervise the recounting of votes. And you have the Elections Commission saying, this is unlawful. The president of Guyana, the leader of the opposition, the two people who command the lists of MPs that sit in Parliament, and Parliament can decide anything. Parliament could pass a law tomorrow that Sanjeev Datadin has to shave his beard, and he'd have to, or else he'd be breaching the law. So Parliament can make any law. So these two people who control the Parliament cannot make a decision for democracy. This has to be looking glass world for something like that to happen.
Right. Thank you. Sanjeev, I want to come to you, but I want to ask you from the following perspective. You'll bring it all together later. But the issue here is that the members from the AFC, APNU are saying that, look, any grounds you have should be taken as an elections petition. But what you have done, what the PPP has done, is to interject into the process. You didn't wait for elections to finish. You have interjected yourself successfully into the process. Now, there is a permanent injunction, I think that's the words that you guys would use, from the CJ. that still stands that ought to have stopped any declaration that didn't abide with 84.1. However, now you have a second injunction telling you that, or telling GECOM that they cannot cast aside that order that the gentleman made. Are these two contradictory, and where does it leave us as a people that do not understand the legalese of things?
Well, good afternoon, you. Good afternoon, Sase, Kamal. Good afternoon to your listeners. Good afternoon to my beautiful wife who's also listening. Yog, this is the problem. The law is fairly straightforward. Section 84.1 says the returning officer counts, tabulates. He adds it up, the statement of polls, in the presence of those who are entitled to be there. This is not rocket science. But what he proceeded to do is to use a spreadsheet. He has since not provided any opportunity to observe the original statement of polls. Now, in the issue of an election petition is really more concerned with issues of the count, allowing to vote, matters that concern that. This issue of what the returning officer, Mingo, did is really one of a public officer complying with a statute. So it's not to tell him that his figures are wrong. It's not to tell him that he didn't allow someone to vote. That's not what to do. This is to tell him that your job is to simply total up those statement of polls. But while you're doing it, you have to allow that the people who are entitled to be there, who include candidates, who include commissioners, who include counting agents, you have to show them your original. So you can't simply sit there and imagine the numbers. And you can't say that when they ask to see your numbers, that these are the numbers from your statement of poll. You also can't use photocopies, which you put up on a projector screen. These are not things that comply with the law. So the injunction that was granted by the Chief Justice and it was granted by Justice Singh, Navindra Singh, and made permanent by the Chief Justice, was that you comply with Section 84.1, which, I mean, to think of it, Yog, it's rather simple. Why do you have to tell a public officer he needs to comply with the law? Surely he could understand English, and surely he knows what statement of polls are. But then we have now yesterday, that injunction now is, the sequence is, in fact, Yog, the permanent injunctions are made by Justice George. Then he breached it again because he continued following the order, using copies and not allowing people to see, and using a spreadsheet. Immediately upon doing that, contempt proceedings were filed. Those contempt proceedings are pending. So what is being alleged is what he did from the time the judge struck down his declaration as being unlawful to what he came to the second declaration is he was in contempt of an order of court, meaning the judge ordered he comply with Section 84, that being total up the statement of polls in the presence of those allowed, and he wasn't doing that. Now what has happened is he continued that breach, and then he made another declaration on Friday night in breach of the order. He then, what they have come to court yesterday to say is that the court should order that that declaration that was made on Friday is a good declaration, and that Lowenfield, as the CEO, must take it into account and prepare his report for the commission. But here is where the absolute, I mean, of all the things that have happened in the past few weeks, this is one. Because how could you be in breach of a court order and you produce a declaration that is valid? One. Then how could another court, when you are in breach of that order, decide to give you an injunction to say that for an interim measure that you would do that? The principle is simple. In life, law is the same. You cannot benefit from your own breach. So if you are in breach of an order, you cannot benefit from the breach. If you weren't happy with the order or you thought that the order that was made is incorrect, that's what the appellate process is for. There's been no appeal filed by either side. So now we have a series of things. And then in between that, we have the leaders of the two parties who have appointed. Those two parties appoint 6 of the 7 members between them. The people there, the statute is clear. They are representatives of the government and the opposition. And you're telling me that the government and the leader of the government and the leader of the opposition came to an agreement as to what should happen with GECOM that has overarching abilities to control what happens in an election. And you can't tell your commissioners that this is what you want to be achieved and this is what they must pass a resolution about. So then it makes no sense. Who's the boss and who's telling who what to do?
That's right. So here, just Sase, I want to come to you next on 2 matters. But Sanjeev, just to close this point up, in effect, from a layman's perspective, are we saying that this later injunction seeks to ratify an illegal declaration? In other words, it seeks to make what is wrong right.
That's simply what it would be. Now, we have to be careful with saying about the wrong right because the contempt has not been heard. In fact, it was the hope of all concerned that once the contempt was filed and once Justice George made her, if I would say, guidance or declarations as to what her orders meant, that it was clear to all and sundry what should take place. But immediately after that, they moved even swifter for 2 hours. They moved quickly and quickly and quickly using the spreadsheet. Now, these things, why would people in GECOM do this? Right. Why would I can't imagine how an entire public institution is so undermined that they have destroyed all the credit people had or trust they had in GECOM, and now they could tell you that it is now night and you wouldn't believe it. There is nothing they can say anymore.
Correct. So I want to get to you because one of the stark things that I don't think people have appreciated that came out is that you are also liable, right? Under the contempt action, you as a commissioner is also liable for GECOM not doing what it ought to have done.
Apparently, Yog, that is so, but I've always been asked the question, if I'm part of the machinery that is so contemptuous of our laws and the rulings of the court, how do I see myself being protected? Thankfully, I'm very vocal, and the representation that I oftentimes repeat it outside for the benefit of the media and by extension the public.
Okay.
So people know the stance that I take and the advocacy that I put forward to ensure the right thing is done. Now, allow me 1 quick second, Yo. The synopsis of the events or the facts that surround the situation as narrated by Sanjeev. People may want to say that Sanjeev has an interest to serve or that I represent a particular side or faction or interest on the commission, or whatever Kamal has to say may be biased for some reason or the other. But only today there is a statement issued by one of the observer groups. The Commonwealth Observer Group expressed a view that the process conducted by Mingo were not credible, transparent, and inclusive. But it didn't stop there. They justified that view by listing about 8 points which led them to that conclusion. And those points are chronicled from the beginning of the ascertaining process, to use the word of the word in the legislation. It chronicled the court action, the first court action. It chronicled the interpretation given by the Honorable Chief Justice to her ruling at the happened, what actions the RO took subsequent to that clarification from the Honorable Chief Justice.
So, Commissioner, I address you as Commissioner because here are some short, rapid questions I want to fire your way. Viewers have asked, and I want to take you out of the current debacle there and go back to some procedural matters. Are there any SOPs in the ballot boxes? Yes, no?
No, there, as far as I can recall, and based on my reading of the law, I don't believe that there are SOPs in the ballot boxes.
Okay. Second question. Take your time here now because this one is important. The APNO AFC has been spreading the narrative, for lack of a better term, that why are you guys and why is Sanjeev and his team lamenting about the use of a spreadsheet by Mingo when all the regions have used spreadsheet? Walk us through what is the derivative meaning thereof.
The law, Section 84(1) of the Representation of the People Act is extremely clear. And we are, I believe, deliberately murking, or it is being murkied to suit various purposes. It says that the RO shall, a mandatory term, shall ascertain the total number of votes cast in favor of each political party contesting by use of statements of poll in the presence of certain persons who are detailed in the legislation.
Okay.
Now, I don't know with any degree have been used in other regions. As far as I know, they have not been used. But in any event,
but let me interject.
Let me finish. I am not an advocate for the use of a spreadsheet, but circumstances change sometimes and things happen. If you have a spreadsheet, you are the returning officer, you have a spreadsheet, the information contained on your spreadsheet ought to reflect what is on my statement of poll. They ought not to differ.
Right. But the distinction I want
to differ, even if they differ, they ought to be, it ought to be reconciled. They are all reconciled. The RO went through 300 odd statements of poll. No issues whatsoever, except which were quickly resolved, very quickly resolved, because it was a matter of misreading or miswriting or something. As soon as they start spreadsheet.
Yeah. But hold on a second. I want to put this in perspective. Right. I want to put this in perspective. Hold on 1 second. So for viewers out there, listen, the issue, and Sase will correct me if I'm wrong as Commissioner, I think Sanjeev would have had his hands very knowledgeable about this. So the issue that we have is that at the various regional declarations, the figures were called out from the SOPs loudly, openly, publicly, and entered into a spreadsheet for tabulation purposes.
Yes, sir.
Right. In the case of Region 4, nobody knew what the SOPs had, but a spreadsheet was pulled out from somewhere, and that was being used to read out. Right or wrong?
Oh, I got to take you back one step before that.
Mm-hmm.
What is an SOP? An SOP is the official result of a polling station. Who is entitled to an SOP? The first two copies, one goes to the CEO, one goes to the Chief Election Officer, one goes to the returning officer. The presiding officer is entitled to a copy. All the agents present, be it a counting agent or a polling agent, at the count, in the polling station at the night there, they're entitled to a copy as well.
Okay.
And most importantly, the law says that the copy must be outside of the polling station. You know what that means, yo? You can leave your home, walk around the corner to the place that you voted, observe what was the result of your polling station in the general and in the regional, and even take a picture. It's a public document. And the law says that that one is the conclusive evidence of the result of that station.
Okay.
So a state of poll is not a cloistered virtue. Everyone has a copy. It's a public document. So if yours doesn't reconcile with mine, there must be a reason proffered for it. And statements of poll have security features.
Of course.
And other methods to verify their authenticity.
Okay.
So you can't just say, if yours differ from mine, there must be a reason.
Understood. So
we ought to reflect the contents of a statement of poll, and it differs. That is a cause for concern.
Correct. So to one of our viewers out there, the reasons why we have to ask persons from both sides of the table these questions is because there is half of Guyana's population that feels convinced. They have been convinced that what transpired there at GECOM is the right thing. Right or wrong, they have so been convinced, and so we have to get to the truth. Kamal, I want to ask you the following. President Granger is on record saying, I cannot instruct GECOM. I cannot tell GECOM. I can only listen to what GECOM says and abide by that. GECOM is constitutional, has a constitutional mandate, blah, blah, blah. How can Granger and Jagdeo then go and have an agreement that purports to instruct GECOM to recount the votes?
Well, you see, Article 9 of the Constitution says that sovereignty resides in the people, and they exercise that sovereignty through their representatives. So the people's will has to be manifested, and the representatives of the people are the president and the leader of the opposition. So they're not breaching any law. Recounts are permitted by law, and GECOM has unlawfully refused those recounts. They've said that the people who applied were not counting agents. Well, the political parties appoint counting agents, and all they have to do is notify GECOM of who the people are. GECOM said, oh, we weren't notified in time. We needed to be notified 7 days before. We were only notified 1 day before, and so you can't have a recount. So what we're having here is an interpretation of the law to foster an undemocratic purpose. Where a law has to be interpreted, it must be interpreted for the public benefit. And if there's one interpretation that allows you allows public benefit, or something like fostering democracy, and not interpretation that hinders democracy, you must take the interpretation that benefits the public. And something that is democratic benefits the public. Now, the president and the leader of the opposition are not directing GECOM to breach the law. What they are doing is fostering democracy. And GECOM has the power under this article that has been circulating, Article 162 of the Constitution. GECOM has the power to issue such instructions and take such action as appear to it necessary or expedient to ensure impartiality, fairness, and compliance with the provisions of this Constitution. Now, if it is that you're exercising sovereignty is voting, you are exercising sovereignty by electing representatives. So GECOM is giving compliance to the words of the provisions of the Constitution by allowing transparency. They have the power to do it, to take such action. So if the president and leader of the opposition want fairness and transparency, they want to ensure that every vote is counted, you can't say, oh, you know what? The law prevents us from having democracy. The law says that we must do X, Y, Z, and the law says so. We can't have democracy. because this is what the law says. Now, in addition to what I've said, there's something called a common sense construction. If something makes sense, if one interpretation makes sense and the other interpretation doesn't make sense, then you go with the interpretation that makes sense. And also, in the Caribbean Court of Justice, in a case from 2007, I believe it was, Justice Saunders, now the president of the court, said, "You know what? The law is not a game. It's not a game. We must do justice. We go along the highway of justice and not the alleyway of technicality." So all of this here, all of these hindrances to democracy, that is not the law. That is not interpreting it on the common sense approach. That is not interpreting it for the public benefit. What they're trying to do is they're trying to take all measures to ensure that there is no recount, although the president, the leader of the opposition, would like who are the representatives of the people, who are the people exercising sovereignty through them, would like to have a recount. And in my view, that's entirely wrong.
But to add to, or to ask your input to this point too, the elections, they're not over, right? Because there's contempt proceedings yet to be heard. And so the technicality that I would want, I don't know, Sanjeev, if you want to step in here, or Sase, or you, Kamal, is this issue with GECOM refusing or saying that you did not abide with the rules in requesting for a recount. Correct me if I'm wrong. RO says he don't know, or he wasn't given notice as to who was the agent. But the fact is that the same RO and dealt with those same agents before in passing out procedures and sharing instructions and stuff like that. And you know, Sanjeev, I must tell you, you got me into some trouble because you started the show, you know, paying heed to your beautiful wife, and Kamal is in trouble, Sase is in some trouble, Anita is getting on at me here. So to hello to all the wives presently. Over to you, sir.
Yog, the thing is very simple, Yog. This is it. When we try to go, we're going around in circles all the time. We expect public officials to discharge their duties in a way that is professional, reasonable, and with judicial precision. Judicial precision simply means that if there are laws and statutes that guide you, you apply them to achieve the purpose of what you want. Now, if you're going to interpret the law to remove counting agents, then what you are doing is the legislative scheme of the Representation of the People Act. What it contemplates is, firstly, you count the votes of the statement of polls in the presence of all that are entitled. Secondly, if the people are not happy with your tabulation process and how you have added up and what figures you have added up, they have a right to ask that you recount the ballots. That is 2. Now, the statute even goes further, right? That you could ask for another recount and another recount. But it makes mandatory that you do the statement of polls, you tabulate it, you add it up. The statute used the words add up. Exactly that. You add it up in the presence of those who are entitled to be there. Your original statement of polls. Now, if they're not happy, because you know you will have the situation that the RO will say my statement of poll has 5 and the APNU or the PPP will say my own has 3. So there's a discrepancy. Now, he doesn't have to resolve that discrepancy in favor of anyone. He can simply proceed and say that this is what it is. Now, but because he has that power, he's just adding it up with you being there, the statute then goes on. That's 84.1. 84.2 says that if you're not happy, your counting agent will request a recount of the ballots, and the RO shall do it. So it's mandatory. He has to do that. So what this RO has done, Yog, is unbelievable. Firstly, he wouldn't produce the SOPs. He has a tally sheet, or a spreadsheet, which has got fantasy numbers on it. And then the only check that you have to that, provided by law, is that you have a counting agent. He then says, well, I don't recognize your counting agent anymore. So what he has single-handedly done is undermine every protection put in the statute. And the $7 billion odd that has been spent by GECOM for a fair election is undermined by one man who is just determined to be, there's no other word for it. He's determined to do what he wants, with figures what he wants, and declare what he wants. He is unconcerned. So $7 billion GECOM has taken to run an election. And one man with a pen and a paper has undone all of that and taken away the entire rights of the nation, every voter. And why has he done it? He has figured out that what he needs to do is declare what he wants, and then he will say, well, there's nobody entitled to ask me a question. We then moved from that to the position where the two leaders did it. And if you look at Section 18 and 19 of the Election Law Amendment Act of 2000, GECOM has the ability to supervise and to do anything in relation to the conduct of registration and the elections. And what would that mean? It's plain English. If they decide that what the ROs refuse the recount, but we would rather have a recount because it will settle. Now, who are the people that have said? All the missions, all the observers, a lot of the candidates, but Granger has said it's not satisfactory because it's been disquiet, and that's why he's agreed to it. So has the leader of the opposition. So why is this rocket science? The followers, the persons they have, their supporters who they're telling that this is an acceptable process, fair enough. But if you want to resolve it, then count the ballots. And when you do, you'll figure out which one is won. Count it in front of everyone. Why lock the press out? Why kick people out of the building? Why use the police as a tool of oppression? This is things that you never thought Guyana would be in this day and age.
Who is going to listen to this matter on Friday?
Justice Holder. Well, so far. Okay. I noticed on social media there were a lot of things that were circulating yesterday that might suggest other things, but so far it's listed to be before Justice Holder on Friday.
Okay. And a question to
if
you.
I could just add from something Sanjeev said before we move on.
Yes.
Section 84 of the Representation of People Act says, uses the word ascertain. He has to ascertain the number of votes. Now, ascertain is synonymous with verify. If you look at the definition, as I did, of ascertain, you have to be certain. You have to make sure that what you have here is the correct number of votes. How do you make sure? How do you become certain? You have to compare. You have to see what's happening. Everybody must have the same thing. If they don't have the same thing, you have to resolve it. You don't just add the numbers up and that's it. You must be certain of those numbers. That's right. The first issue. The second issue is, in 1997, there was a recount of all of the ballots. It happened after the declaration had been made, after Mrs. Jagan had become president. But there was a recount. Now, what legislation was different then from now that allowed it then but doesn't allow it now? There was a recount, and it was agreed to after CARICOM intervened. How could it have happened then lawfully, but it can't happen now?
That's a good point.
Those are two things I wish to add.
Great point. Sanjeev, here is a question from one of our viewers to you. That the APNO AFC have said that it is the PPPC who give copies of their SOPs to the other parties contesting elections. And so in the eyes of all the opposing parties, you are sharing the same, you're reading from the same hymn book. Is that correct or false?
As far as I'm aware, it is not true. I've seen public statements. I know the chairman, Panog, and I know that he has been tirelessly, Mr. Jonas has been tirelessly telling people that he did have a small number from his people, but he did set about sending his party members to take pictures of the polls that had been posted up, and he has them. He has a few hundred of those. The same is true for Miss Lam. I think it's her party's Citizenship Initiative or something like that. But anyway, they have all done this. They're capable of doing this. They have repeated it. But Yog, the issue is moot. If you're saying that the PPP gave everybody statement of polls, count the ballots, because then it don't matter what has happened. You see, the PPP took the unusual step. The leadership took the unusual step As soon as the trouble started and we realized there was trouble about what Mr. Mingo was doing, we published all our statement of polls on Region 4 online so anybody could see it, what we have and how we arrived at our numbers. Nobody else has done that. If APNU wants to say that what we published was somehow incorrect or not representative of the truth, then publish yours. But I was there. They came to the verification exercise where they were tabulating without any statement of polls, without anything. They came with a spreadsheet actually, which is even more alarming. But I don't want to say that to raise inferences of other things because I have no proof. But they really, on more than one occasion, showed up without anything. And I was there, and I can tell you that it's beggars belief. You say that if you say that what the PPP has done is given all the smaller parties it, then I'm sure that when you open those boxes and count those votes one at a time, you will find which one is correct and which one is not.
Correct.
It resolves the position conclusively.
Well said. Mr. Gunraj, I want to come to you next, but let's take a short commercial break first. When I come to you, I would like if you could walk us back to, would you have been part of the meeting that now decided to seek legal advice? And I think they relied on the legal advice of the Chief Parliamentary Counsel, which Anil Nandalal has rubbished today in his own writings on social media. So I would like us to address it from the perspective of the Commission seeking legal advice, and what's your thoughts of that, but after the commercial break. Let's take a commercial break.
Looking for Attention fellow Guyanese, no need to go into person anymore to book your flight. Book your flight over the phone with a Travelspan GT agent. Once you finish booking over the phone, our agent will give you a payment center close to your home. That's right, no hassle for travel anymore. Travelspan is making it convenient and easier for you to book your flights. No need to travel to the office. Call Travelspan GT today for low fares. Call 227-1701. That's 227-1701. Or in Berbice, call Rose Hall at 337-4287. Travelspan making it easier. So call 227-1701. That's 227-1701 or Rose Hall at 337-4287.
Wonderful. So we're back. Mr. Gunraj, you're commissioner, one of the commissioners at GECOM. GECOM would have sought legal opinion, and I think they relied on the opinion given by the Chief Parliamentary Counsel that took them back to the Constitution. I don't think that the election, well, he took them back to the election laws. I don't think that, according to Mr. Anil Nandalal, that the relevant sections of the Representation of People Act would have been looked at. And just before you answer, sir, Mr. Nandalal, in his response today, he sought to educate the public, I believe, that law has various bases. One is, of course, the legal definition, and the other is the purposive intent, or the intent behind making the laws. And that in giving opinion, one need to look at all of these factors and not just look at a literal meaning of a word. But sir, over to you.
We don't need to go outside of this forum to get that opinion, that legal opinion about the interpretation of laws. Earlier on, Kamal gave a very good synopsis of the approach we need to take when looking at laws that govern particularly these operations that we're currently. So I want to say that the Chief Parliamentary Counsel was not taken into consideration because by the time it was received, it was overtaken by events because the injunction was already served on the commission. But let me take one step back. At yesterday's meeting, early in the morning, we were informed, the meeting was informed by the Chief Elections Officer that the head of the high-level team that was assembled by CARICOM was requesting some sort of gazetted order that will give some sort like legal cover for their operation. I believe the commission immediately thought that it was something that we were willing to do because we also wanted to ensure that there was a legal framework within which this recount was being conducted, given the fact in relation the misdeeds, if I can so describe them, of the returning officer Mingo. Now, that being said, an order was drafted, and it was my opinion that this was not being, the advice of the Chief Parliamentary Council was not being sought for the purposes of ascertaining the legality of it per se. It was more of the form of it rather than the substance of it, because this commission was settled about the legal framework within which it was operating. As Sanjeev alluded to it a moment ago, Article 162 of the Constitution defines what are the, it provides the structure of GECOM and what the ambit of the act called the Elections Law Amendment Act. It was Act 15 of 2000, specifically Section 22 of that Act. The marginal note, which tells you what is the content of that section, speaks to removal of difficulties. And it gives a very wide power to the Elections Commission to take any steps by order, and that is by the publication of an order in the official gazette, to remove difficulties associated with the application of that said Act 15 of 2000, with the Representation of the People Act 103, as well as the National Registration Act 1908. Because 1908, registration, as you know, is also a very pivotal function of the now, it was under that act that recourse was sought to remove difficulties in the application of Chapter 103, which guides the process of the Elections Commission in the holding of an election. So I don't want to be less than charitable to the Chief Parliamentary Council, but the reality is that his view is a very restrictive view that I do not agree with.
Right.
Yog, if I could just help you out with a simple thing, right? I'll just read just simple parts. Article 162 of the Constitution says this: Elections Commission shall have such functions connected with or relating to the registration of electors and the conduct of elections as conferred upon it, and it goes on by what? But B, 162B, 1B said, it shall issue such instructions and take such action as appear to it to be necessary or expedient to ensure impartiality, fairness, and compliance with the provisions of the Constitution or of any act of Parliament on the part of persons exercising powers or performing duties connected with or relating to the matters aforesaid. I don't think it's complicated English, Yog. 162 1B says that they could issue such instructions to the people who must comply with law. And if they believe that there has not been a compliance with law, the commission can say to those people that this is what I want you to do. So if Mingo took the step that he wants to deny all of the recounts, the commission can say to Mingo that we think that you should accept those denials, that those applications, and you should do a recount. That's all that's required. This has been taken into a circle. People say things that don't exist in law, don't exist anywhere in reality. And they make it up and they say, well, you can't do this and you can't do that. I've seen people say that you can't open the ballot boxes ever again. I can't imagine why are we keeping the ballot boxes at great expense for if we can't ever open the ballot boxes.
Right.
But these things The Constitution, and this is what I was saying before you, it is clear, it is in plain English. But what do you do when a man refuses to do his duty? It doesn't matter whether you have a constitution, a statute, a court order. He is unconcerned. He is determined to do what he is doing because he is unconcerned about consequences.
Right. So, Kamal, back to you, because that's, Sanjeev, that's the same question a viewer sent in, that is Mr. Mingo beyond a reproach? Is Mr. Mingo unstoppable? Look, if it's one thing that the past 2 weeks has taught me, your Mahadeo, is if there is a will, there is a way. Even if it's a wicked will, there is a way. So, Kamal, can Mr. Mingo be stopped? And would Guyana, let us just say that the contempt, the current injunctions are discharged and the contempt proceedings are held. What is Guyana looking out for if the contempt proceedings hold true? I mean, is it we're going to go around the same cycle again for infinity?
Well, if you looked at the Commonwealth release today, you would see that they said that his superiors have done nothing, which is their duty to correct whatever wrong action he's doing. He has bosses. The chief election officer is his boss. The chairman is his boss. So if he is doing incorrect things which are hindering democracy and harming democracy, his bosses should say, look, Mr. Mingo, you have to be transparent. We work here in a transparent organization, and we need things to go straight in accordance with the laws. But they haven't said anything. So that's the first place it happens. The second place is for the court to tell him, Mr. Mingo, you don't run this country. The country has to be run in a straight way, an honest way, and these things have to be done. So I don't know what the problem is. The only reason
But Kamal, didn't the Chief Justice use such words that would have allowed Mingo to use whatever process he wants, and thus the man went and did the same thing?
Well, to use whatever process he wants, so long as he complies with Section 84.1. If he wants to go through the statements of poll and then write it down on a piece of toilet paper, that's fine. But he has to go through the statements of poll, because that is what Section 84.1 says. And that is what the Chief Justice said. He must comply with the law. And she quashed his earlier decision because it was not in compliance with the law. So what she said, how he wants to tabulate it afterwards, he can tabulate it in any way he wants to afterwards, but it has to come from the statements of poll. He doesn't have the discretion to do whatever he wants. He has to take it from the statements of poll. He can write it in a notebook, he can write it in a piece of toilet paper, he can put it in a spreadsheet, but it has to come from the statements of poll.
Allow me to interrupt for a second. For two reasons. You preface your question to where there's a will, there's. But you know what? There obviously was a will to thwart the democratic process and the will of the electorate, which has resulted in all that we see happening under the hand of Mingo and his bosses, like you refer to them as. And obviously, there was no will to facilitate the operation of the high-level team facilitated by CARICOM. As a consequence, no way was found. But instead, everything was found to hinder that. But I referred earlier on to the CARICOM statement. And for the purposes of this discussion, if you'd allow me about 2 minutes to read the specific issues that they have recorded there, I believe it will be of great. The specific issues include the repeated cessation of the tabulation process for a variety of irregular reasons. The group did not, and they're talking about their observer group, the group did not observe any material or substantive impediments inside the tabulation room, which might have prevented the resumption of the tabulation process. It is the group's clear view that robust exchanges between political party agents in the room only occurred when GECOM repeatedly halted the tabulation process. I believe it was imperative that the group added that because in court proceedings, Mingo himself and his handlers alleged that the process was halted because of the action presence of political parties. So this debunks that. The other one, the unlawful declaration made by Mr. Mingo on 5 March at about 2 p.m. Despite the tabulation process being halted, the unlawful 5 March declaration of Mr. Mingo was undertaken under heavy police guard, and his departure from the tabulation center was guided and guarded by 6 police officers. Why is this necessary for a public officer if he's doing his job? And they go on. The continued failure of returning officer Mr. Mingo to comply with the 11 and 13 March orders and judgments of the acting Chief Justice. On 13 March, the Chief Justice made it patently clear that actual statements of poll should be shown to entitled parties present for the avoidance of doubt. Demonstrate herself how they and inquired what was the difficulty in doing so during the contempt of court proceedings. However, on resuming the tabulation after leaving the court on 13 March, Mr. Mingo refused all requests from those entitled to be present to view the actual statements of poll and did not display the spreadsheet being populated.
Right. So
this, no, a little bit. I will not complete all they've said. Let me just read this last sentence from them. Excuse me. This compromised the process of ascertaining the credibility of the statements of poll relied on by Mr. Mingo to tabulate the result. And it was impossible for party agents and those entitled to be present to observe that the numbers being called out were being accurate, and they make a point even more egregious irregularities. In some cases, the tabulation totals announced by Mr. Mingo on 13 March reflected more voters that were entered on the list of eligible electors for certain polling stations. And this is where the clincher comes in, and this was referred to earlier on Kamal. At no time did the leadership of the Guyana Elections Commission halt or rectify these blatant instances of disregard for the rule of law and electoral ethics, despite its vested authority to independently ensure credible elections. This,
Right.
I believe, is the most succinct
Well, it's good that you read that out, but
and view it well that is invited to observe these elections.
right. It's good that you read that out because that is plainly put. But Sase, I want to ask you one last question on the same point. I cannot presume, I would not want you to presume that you can sit in the mind of the chair. But the country is wondering, where is this woman that everybody had respected? Why has the chairperson of GECOM been so reluctant to fulfill her mandate?
You preface your question by saying you don't want to put me in the mind of the chair. I will not accept that invitation to go there, But it is unfortunate. It is unfortunate that someone who has brought to the commission so many years of stellar judicial service and who has earned a reputation seems to be acting contrary to that reputation that we have grown accustomed to.
Right. So, gentlemen, we have dealt with, and it's not enough. I know that we have to do this again because, you know what, a lot of things are there to discuss on what's been happening because obviously the biggest question of the night is what's next. But before we get to that, Kamal, I want to come to you with a question that was sent in, I think, from Mr. Gafoor earlier today, and it takes us back a little bit. Can you discuss how the country is run in between dissolution of parliament and swearing in of the next president? Does the president, who is maybe whatever word you want to use, interim, excuse me, does he have the power to change cabinet members? Can he replace the GECOM commissioners, the police commissioner, head of GDF, and so forth and so on? How does the president operate, and are the ministers legitimate and legal in the views of the law?
Well, I'd preface my answer, Yog, by saying today is the 18th of March. We had elections on the 2nd of March. Under no contemplation of any sort could you imagine that so many days after election, 16 days after election, you would not have a new government, whether the government is the incumbent re-elected or another party elected into government. There's no sort of contemplation that you would have no new government, no results of elections to tell you who the government should be. But having said that, the law is, the Constitution says that the president is the president until a new president is sworn in, and the ministers are ministers until a new president is sworn in. So they remain in office. One would assume that the role is extremely limited to handing over to the new government, whether it is the very president being resworn as president or it is a new president. It is limited until such time as the final declaration is made and the new president sworn in. You can't do anything as you like. You don't run the country in the same way. Things are obviously very different at that time. And as I said, there's no contemplation that this could take 16 days.
Parliament would have been prorogued 30 days before too, right? So it's a longer period.
So we have no idea in any event when this is going to end and how it is going to end, although I have a good idea how it's going to end. But we don't know.
Right. So I want to engage both you and Sanjeev on this next question. As of today, and we're going to move away from elections a little bit. As of today, there has, to the alarm of many members of the public, been orders, directives signed by the president that seem to have transferred authority to the Minister of Public Health and the Minister of Finance. I myself, I was a little amazed with the language used, and whoever drafted that really has a way with words and has a way to get the president to sign those words, because one would understand, Kamal and Sanjeev, that across the world, governments are taking condign action, which includes dealing with the dead, dealing with the living that's under threat, and dealing with the living that has already become infected, right? And these are condign actions. Governments across the world have put a stop to meeting in public places. That's nothing new. But the one that I think is strange here to the people is the one that gives the minister, not a team, but the minister, the authority to search, to detain, to burn you if you die, to get rid of your body, and to destroy your property. Kamal,
you see, the legislation or the indications of the legislation, Yog, is that the chief medical officer should have had a say. There is also the indications of the legislation, without going into detail, that the Central Board of Health is the authority that should have met with the president and given him the advice of what it is to do. Now, we are in difficult times. We might not have all of the Central Board of Health or to convene the meetings, but there is no reason to destroy property, not in relation to this particular virus that is spreading. There is no reason to give the minister the powers of searching randomly to invade places. Why are those powers required? The Minister of Finance has also been given the power to spend everything he needs to do so. Now, to give those sort of powers when you have not had a parliament for more than a year, when you have had these issues with the election, and to choose to do this unilaterally is dangerous. Because obviously, we saw the EU report a few days ago in the press that this government has been using government resources to campaign. Now, This order that is made now allows the Minister of Finance access to the Treasury, which he had hitherto lost from Election Day. Now, for him to have access to the Treasury, is this now to fund something else? Is this now to fund what is going to go on and where we are in terms of determining votes and determining that will all take time? But where is the check and balance and where is the supervision? There is no parliament to supervise this. And these orders that are made, respectfully, they go far beyond the pale that is required. I agree with you, Yog, that we are in difficult times and governments are making very drastic steps and doing very drastic moves. But you can't go about spending public funds as you choose. And that's the fear. And why destroy property? Those are really tools of oppression to allow a minister to make that decision and not the chief medical officer and not the Central Board of Health to have a say in what goes on and how these things have come about. Really smacks of authoritarianism. That's what it is.
And also, I mean, Kamal, I want to come to you with this. Does the wording of this set of directives, does it intimate in a way that the president has given this responsibility over to these two ministers, but specifically to point to the fact that the Minister of Public Health may take such measures as to restrain, to remove to hospital, to remove, disinfected, destroy personal effects, and so forth. Is it like almost transferring power over to people?
Well, I would look at this as emergency regulations without declaring a state of emergency. I think it is extremely dangerous. Now, it becomes more dangerous because we've had elections and we haven't had a president declared a new government put into office. This government is, I don't want to say it's on its way out because they could be re-elected and they could go back in, but the government from 2015 to 2020 is on its way out. Whether they're re-elected or not is another matter. During this period of elections, we should have broad-based consultation before determining the approach. The opposition and the government should come together and decide jointly what should happen. Now, these are vast and frightening powers. Suppose the minister were to decide tomorrow that Sanjeev Datadin is a person whose house she had to search, his property had to be taken and destroyed, and Sanjeev had to be taken to a place that we don't know where this place is. And the next thing you hear, Sanjeev has died of this disease and his body had to be cremated. These are extremely dangerous and frightening powers. So now what would we do in such a situation? Would we know what the truth was? How would we be able to know? Such powers should not normally exist except in the direst of situations, much less on circumstances.
But Kamal, I want to come back to you at one point here, and it's a matter of language. Look, if you take the Singaporean order, similar order, in Singapore, the president signed an order that declared classes closed, mass gatherings, and so forth and so on, land and sea and air travel restricted. All of those are declared in the president's order. The president there didn't say, okay, the minister shall. The president made those orders, and in the final two paragraphs, the president said, this body, namely Executive Secretary, Cabinet Secretary, Environment and Natural Resources, Trade and Industry, Social, to Sanjeev's point, includes the Chief Medical Officer, names the committee in the directive. In Guyana, that is not in these directives. However, I have heard, as of this evening, Moses Nagamutu on television saying he was appointed by the president to head a committee that will look at the task force that will look at this thing. But should it not have been part of this directive then?
The power should never be in the hands of a politician. The power should be in the hands of medical professionals to determine if such a power is necessary. And I don't think such a power is necessary at this point in time. But if it were necessary, it should be in the hands of medical professionals, not one person, but a board of people, perhaps coming from a wide cross-section of medical society.
One of the astonishing things when I saw the order this morning that occurred to me, I have been trying to look around to see how many countries have taken to hold in quarantine centers where persons who are suspected to be infected are taken to one place. Now, if you look at some of the guidelines that I have seen, especially in Europe, the US, Canada, the idea is to reduce interactions so that as long as you're not around people, you are in safer, your chances are best. It doesn't mean you're safer. I mean, your chances just improve. But now, if you've tested positive for the coronavirus and you are put into a holding facility with, as I understand it, 400 or 321 others are put in the facility, because the facility, I saw varying numbers, but I saw that there was a television program where they said that they could hold 350 people, and then one said 400 odd persons. So out of a population of 750,000, we have passed an executive order that the quarantining will not be self-quarantining. What we will do is we will arrest people, take them to a quarantine center and hold them. Right. But we could only hold 400 odd people and 750,000 people. So what are we going to do with the rest exactly? That's the first thing. Secondly, why would you want to put them all in the same place? Because they're going to have varying levels. Some people will have it in a more severe way, some people will have it in a less. Why do you want them to interact? That's two. Thirdly, why do you want to destroy their property? And why do you want to give the minister superseding powers with that? That is a tool of oppression. And with what is going on now, and those who are standing up and fighting for democracy, exactly what Kamal said is what those sorts of tools are used for. Those are the 1970s dictators all over again. What they will do is they will use the force of the state to silence you, supposedly by law.
Sanjeev, did it strike you as coincidence, or you use whatever words, that when your matter was going to be heard at the High Court, there was a fumigation, and when Sase and team had to start this recount, there was a fumigation at the Artachong Center. What came through your minds then?
I was thinking that wherever else I'm going next, I should warn the people there's going to be fumigation. I don't know if to take it personally or not, but you have to understand how childish this is. Do you know that what was told, at least what was told to our representatives, was this, that they had to move from the Hatfield High Street building, the Region 4 office, to the head office in Kingston because they didn't have a projector. Now, I would have thought it's easier to move a projector than to move everybody and everything else. Secondly, we then go to a shed, which, I mean, it's been described in the press, I see, as a cow shed. I mean, describe it however you want. It's an open shed. It's got a zinc roof and no walls. And there is a white sheet put against the wall with the setting sun behind you. And you have a projector in broad daylight at 4 o'clock trying to read what's on that. My glasses are only made by human beings. They're simple glasses. They help me to read a little better and I see a little better. But I don't know what you had to wear to be able to read what was on that screen. I mean, it's beggars belief. These tricks are so, I mean, they're childish. They are childish. Yesterday, all morning, nothing happens. The day before, nothing happens, because in my mind, and I only speak for myself, I felt that what they were doing is trying to figure out, and by they, I mean a combination of GECOM and APNU, figuring out what's going on.
Sase is GECOM.
Well, Sase is locked out. Sase is worse than me. They allow me in and they left him out. I don't understand how this works. How could you kick the commissioners out of GECOM?
Right. So Sase, you were saying...
police did that.
Sase, you wanted to make a point there.
I want to differentiate, and I say this because I understand. I read a very detailed plan being disclosed prior about fumigation and sanitization of the High Court. against this COVID-19 virus on the weekend. But notwithstanding that, when the necessity arose for a hearing, the Honorable Chief Justice, in her used her initiative, arranged a hearing at the Diamond Magistrates Court, and a hearing was facilitated against those odds. On the contrary, all day you're waiting on Monday for something to happen. As soon as persons observe the various agents of almost all the parties except the APNU plus AFC turned up, observers, etc. And then lo and behold, as the sun began to go down, a vehicle marked Ministry of Public Health Vector Control Department comes to spray, or they claim to fumigate. But fumigate against what? Vector control does not control the spread of coronavirus. We've all been reading a lot, thankfully, about how the virus is spread and controlled. So we know it was all a farce, right? And then you're told that you're being locked out of the building. Coupled with that, riot police appears on the ground and ushers you out of the building. It was only after intense negotiation that I and that's another thing, I believe that these commanders probably are scared now to offer anything, because you offer any assistance or any rational solution to issues, because you would have seen a stated reason for the removal of Mr. Edgar Thomas was because he refused to put myself and others out of the RO4 building, which was later stormed by riot police and the persons forcibly removed.
And those directives are purely political. They didn't come from GECOM, right?
I don't want to say that. What I want to say is on the previous occasion, that is to say at the Ashman's building when the riot police came, they came moments after we were requested to remove by the Deputy Chief Elections Officer, Roxanne Myers.
Okay. So the commission has put forward.
Was disrespected by a TSU rank who said, I have a job here to do and you can't tell me anything. A junior rank is saying that to a senior rank,
Wow. So here what? I want to just take a quick commercial break and come back to you. Kamal, I want to come to you with a question that has come in from one of the viewers. This is after the break. It's a question I would have preferred to not ask at this juncture, but we kind of accommodate these things. What happens if, under a period of constitutional crisis, for a lack of better word, that we are in presently, if the president becomes ill in a country like Guyana, what happens then? But let's go off on a commercial break, and you think of that answer, we come back to deal with it.
Hi, it's Richard David. I'm your Democratic District Leader here in South Ozone Park. I'm urging you to take the coronavirus warnings seriously. This idea that it won't happen to me is false. It's happening all throughout the community. We have a lot of people who are in quarantine. Just yesterday, we had double the number of cases in New York City. Please take it seriously. Please avoid human-to-human contact. And we're going to get through this.
January marks 1 year since Globespan 24x7 embarked on this initiative to offer a platform that brings in all sides, all points of view, and all concerns. Viewers in Guyana and across the world are participating in discussions that are bringing to light issues relating to social, economic, and political matters that have been plaguing our nation. Globespan's platform offers Guyanese to express their concerns and discuss solutions in the political realm, thereby addressing the polarized situation. Discussions also include social ills, such as alcoholism, domestic violence, and suicides that have been plaguing the people. The platform also mitigates the brain drain by having speakers that live in Guyana and across the world participate in these discussions. This concept will avail a broader view for the benefit of all Guyanese, so Globespan needs your support to offset the expenses. Kindly contribute by clicking the link in the description to help support these programs. Dr.
Yo,
Yog, we're
we're
not
not
hearing you.
hearing you again.
Sorry about that. Yeah, just before I go over to Kamal to answer those questions, Sase, I would want you to note this question, please, that whether it can be plainly put that the GECOM lower level staff ended up putting out the GECOM commissioners, the higher level people, but you'll answer that when we come around back.
Answer that one time before you go, Yo. The answer is yes.
Okay. Kamal,
And
over to you.
I know you want. I'll come back to give you further details afterwards.
Okay, Kamal, over to you with that question of what happens in a situation like this if a president falls ill. Keep in mind Freddie Kissoon's article of today.
Before I answer that, I just want to echo what Say said about the Chief Justice facilitating hearings in the High Court. She has gone above and beyond the call of duty to facilitate hearings. We had hearings on Saturdays and Sundays, so that fumigation was not a means of stopping a hearing. We even went to Diamond Court to have a hearing when the court was being fumigated. So if the president falls ill and can't perform his functions, well, the next person to perform the functions would be the Prime Minister. And if the Prime Minister can't do it, the next person is the first Vice President. So there is a clear hierarchy of how things go. I don't think either of those people are APNU members, though. So that might cause some sort of internal conflict, but that's what the Constitution says. That is the hierarchy of operation.
Right. And Kamal, before I go on, just quickly deal with this issue that a viewer sent in to you specifically that you mentioned. I'm sorry to go back a little bit, but for clarity of the viewers out there, that you would have mentioned that the law that when Janet Jagan was sworn in, that the recount happened after she was sworn in. So they're asking you why then this change, why you want to recount before swearing in.
Because that's when the issue arose, The issue arose afterwards. The issue didn't arise before. In this case, the issue is arising before. So the whole problem only happened after she was sworn in as president. And they agreed still. But the issue is happening before there's a swearing in. Don't we want to know genuinely what the results are, what the votes say when the law provides for a recount? Should we then have what could be the wrong result, and then we go and try to correct it? How is that possible? And that only happened after CARICOM intervention. Three people came, Sir Shurat Ramphal, I think Sir Henry Ford, and Sir Alistair McIntyre, I believe those were the three people. They came and there was discussion between Mr. Hoyt and Mrs. Jagan, and they arrived at the Herdmanston Accord. Her term was cut short by about 3 years. There was wide-ranging constitutional reform. So all sorts of things happened then. They're not included the recount. Now, the law says that you can have a recount, but the recount is being stymied and stifled.
Correct. Well, thank you for that. Sanjeev, I want to come to you next, and keep in mind, I'm sorry that we have run out of program time. So in dealing with the remainder of the questions, we'll have to wrap up at the same time. Sanjeev, what's next for you and the PPPC? And I'll before you answer, I'll preface the following. Half of the population, well, a significant portion of Guyana's population feel that they cannot accept an Irfaan Ali presidency. And so maybe this is why they have been guided to not support any call for recount. What is your counter, and where does the PPPC see itself heading from here?
You see, I see a lot of people raising all the various issues again about whether Irfaan Ali would be a good president, what are the pros and cons, and all the old issues. The campaign's long done. The people have spoken. All we have to do is simple. We have to ensure that we deliver the will of the people in these elections. What happens after that, it is my hope, is more of a political decision for the leadership. But we need to come together. We need to heal. There are going to be changes. I'm certain there will be changes in the way things were done in the past and the way things are going to be done in the future. I'm certain of that. But the first thing that we have to do, and the first hurdle, the campaign is over. There is no need for you to pull down any person, any leader, any member anymore. The time for that well, it should not have happened in the first place, but the politicking is over. This is now delivering the will of the people. I'll tell you, Yo, the first night out there on the road when the fumigation and vector control people turned up at the Artichong Center, and I went out there, I was trying to assist with various persons to find lights, to put lights. They essentially put lights all around from the property so that it shone on the containers so that you could see what was going on. I will tell you that there was not only PPP supporters out there, there were not only APNU supporters, there were everybody. People from around Georgetown went there to stood guard, and they stood guard until 4 a.m. and thereabouts, when, at least that's as far as I know. But they stayed out there, and they weren't only Indians, they weren't only Negroes, they weren't only Amerindians, they were all kinds. And that is because, barring about, as far as I can tell, 5 people, barring about 5 people, everybody would be satisfied if we recounted the vote and then let the chips fall where they may. Whoever's won is won. And let's move on. Let's form a government and move on. That's all that's what is in front of us. Yog, I am a little too young to know of the 70s elections. I mean, I was born, but too young to, but I know what the 80s were like, and I know what the Exodus is. The fear is this is what is happening all over again. And if we have this one rigged election here, we can probably kiss the next 20 years goodbye. Because essentially what will happen, in all my life as a practicing attorney, in all my adult life, I have not seen police be aggressive the way they have. I have not seen, and you had to be there to understand, police coming into the building in riot gear. Nobody's doing anything, and Sase will elaborate, but Miss Myers is giving instructions as what to do. Sase, old chap, got put out. Miss Myers remained in that building. Everybody had to vacate. But these things, I'm telling you, Yog, I mean, if I didn't actually stay there until 4 a.m. and 5 a.m. 2 days in a row and out on the place during the night, if I didn't actually see these things, I would find them hard to believe. Policemen walk in for no reason and said and behaved in this way. The division commander came in and he said he can't remove the people.
Right.
He was replaced the next day. This is unbelievable.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah. Thank you for that, Sanjeev. Says, what's next?
The solution is very simple, yo. The legislation that I referred to earlier on, the article of the Constitution which guides our operation, allows us to put in place arrangements to remove difficulties in the application of the Act. Sanjeev has read very detailed Article 162. To place arrangements that will enhance our processes. I can't see any right-thinking member of society, any Guyanese locally and abroad, or persons who are concerned with the welfare of Guyana and Guyanese, and those of us who live here, would not want to see a smooth ending to this process. And what was the smooth ending? Allow a recount of all the ballots. Imagine the president and the leader of the opposition, the two probably most, I'm thinking the word powerful, and I'll use it, the two most powerful politicians in Guyana, who control perhaps the majority of the voting public, have agreed to put the system in place. And it is being stymied by persons far below their stature politically. And you also see an action being brought in court by a candidate of the political party headed by the president to stymie an agreement that is entered into by the president. So where do we go from here? It's very simple. We put the framework, the order is drafted. I believe, if I must say so myself, I had a firm hand in drafting the order. I believe it is a well-drafted order, but it is, of course, subject to persons with greater legal aptitude than I have. I have no difficulty with that. I'm not the best. And we can have that order gazetted in a short space of time. Outside is probably telling me that program time is over. We have the order gazetted, and we move on. A recount can start. A recount can start at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Understood.
And with diligence and the will that you spoke about, we can have this done. We can have this done by the weekend. We can have this done and dusted. This country can return to normalcy. We can all put our focus on this pandemic that is threatening our existence. Those are the things that this country wants to see. It doesn't want to be tied up in uncertainty.
Correct.
And uncertainty about the outcome, and uncertainty about how long an outcome will take.
Mm-hmm. Plus, indeed, thank you for that, Sase. Plus, Kamal, I want to come to you for your closing words, because, you know, Sase is so right. The matter of governance of this country has been cast aside, basically, because of the state of where we are. Now, oil has dropped to under $21 as of an hour ago, whereas Exxon's cost of production is $35. So every day we're just running up debts now. And nobody's looking at these things. Our gold reserves have vanished. Everything has vanished in this country, basically, even the SOPs, right? So, yeah, so Kamal.
Some SOPs, not all.
Yes. Kamal, for your closing comments, you know, from a legal perspective, yet an independent legal perspective, what do you want to see now? And really, what is pragmatic? The country is depressed. A lot of people feel that the government is just going to go ahead and swear themselves in regardless of what the court orders, sanctions or not. Come on, what's ahead?
Well, in the Cedric Richardson matter and the Attorney General, the CCJ went on at length about our Constitution and how you interpret the Constitution to give effect to democracy. And I think I said it at the beginning. Laws are interpreted to give effect to democracy. Laws can never be interpreted to hinder democracy. You could never say that the law says X, Y, Z, and I'm going to apply it in order to hinder transparency and democratic practice. So I know that there is a solution which allows transparency and democracy to prevail. Unfortunately, I believe that a plan has been afoot here. This is not something that is happening by chance. We are fulfilling a plan, and I don't think, unfortunately, that it's going to have a happy ending for democracy and transparency. Unfortunately.
Right. Thank you for that. And gentlemen, thank you so very much for joining us tonight on this Globespan program. I certainly hope we had a little bit more time, because I wanted to talk about what are your thoughts about the threats for sanctions and so forth. But I know that I can call on the three of you again if we have to do this in a week's time, because we want to look at the international implications and bring on some other perspectives. And in a week's time, we hopefully we can pray, those of us who pray, and those of you who are the legal guys can do your work. We hope, viewers, that we can really put this entire thing behind us, have a recount of the votes. I myself, from an independent platform, I have no political affiliation. I have said there are groups, there are persons like me, we are willing to lend our support. I have challenged APNU AFC. If you want to join the argument, bring your SOPs. Until you bring your SOPs, you have no argument to make. I'm sorry. So we all want to see a fair process. Whoever is the winner from that process is fine, we will embrace. Gentlemen, thank you for putting these legal things in perspectives, and we certainly wish you good health because you guys are out there in the protests and you are mingling with everybody. But stay safe as you go about your business, because the coronavirus is a threat to everyone. Stay safe, stay good, and continue doing the alert and good work you're doing. And thank you all. Viewers out there, please remember, social distancing is important. It's one time you will ever hear Yog Mahadeo say, keep away from people. Don't socialize. Don't even try to pray together. Pray selfishly alone. Be safe. Don't visit grandma, don't visit grandpa. Keep them safe. Let us keep our social distance. And if you have flu, there are things you can do. Nohar and I, we're trying to put together a team to discuss the COVID-19 from another perspective. Hopefully we can get something done there. But please be safe, and if you can, do a prayer for this motherland of ours, this dear land of Guyana. Namaste, good night, assalamu alaikum.
Good night,
Have a
you.
good night,
Good night,
everyone.
Sase. Good night,
And thank you
you.
for
Good night,
coming.
Kamal.
Good night, Yoke. Good night, guys.